Emeritus Baker ID Heart and Diabetes Institute Adjunct Professor, Monash and Victoria Universities, Melbourne and University of Pittsburgh, USA, Professor Paul Zimmett. Now, that is a lot there. You must be doing some wonderful things. Now, Paul is an Honorary President of the International Diabetes Federation, so we are especially delighted to have him here on World Diabetes Day. And Paul is a well-renowned leader in the field of diabetes and was one of the first people to predict that the world epidemic of diabetes would be what we are actually experiencing today. So welcome to the stage.
Well, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners, past and present, and it's a great privilege to be here, particularly as Alex Brown's been one of my longest friends, one of the few friends that I think I've kept, because I argue so much with others, but he's a very distinguished investigator, a wonderful person, and this project that he's been able to put together, which has taken a number of years to crystallise in his own mind and then bring together a whole group of people, both from the Indigenous scientific community and community like yourselves, and other scientists in Australia. I think this is really a landmark study, as Steve has mentioned earlier. I am involved with the International Diabetes Federation in an honorary presidential capacity, and the present president, Sir Michael Hirst, has asked me to send his best wishes for you on this World Diabetes Day. I know it's clashing with the pageant and Christmas is coming, but it's an important day, which was decided by the United Nations in 2006 on a motion at the United Nations, which I think is probably be the only unanimous motion ever entertained at the United Nations, believe it or not. So diabetes is probably the fastest growing epidemic around the world, and it's affecting particularly Indigenous communities. Alex and I were in Copenhagen about 2 or 3 years ago now for a meeting that we were very influential in setting up to discuss the problem globally of diabetes in Indigenous communities. Alex played a very important role because there are a lot of people there who really didn't understand Indigenous communities, and they were coming up with all sorts of motions and whatnot. And at a certain point of time in the meeting, the hall cleared except for a few white people, and the whole group of people at the back, led by Alex, were starting a protest to make sure that the outcomes of that meeting would be appropriate for Indigenous people. And I think that again illustrates his strength. The data on diabetes, which I presume Alex may mention later on, in Australia is still a little bit questionable because the government funded a study by the ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, which we are continuing to challenge, not necessarily on the number of people with diabetes, but the people in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait community who have what we call pre-diabetes. And they claimed in their big study, millions of dollars, that only 5% of your community have pre-diabetes. And we know from other studies that something like 25%. It's probably 5 times higher than what a government bureaucratic department is prepared to state. I'm not going to spend hours lecturing here, but I thought it'd be worth telling you about something that happened yesterday morning, and that was that the Federal Minister for Health, Minister Suzanne Lee, released the new Australian National Diabetes Strategy, the strategy 2016 to 2020. This is a very important initiative. It's the first strategy for over 10 years, and previous strategies, nothing ever happened, but we felt that Suzanne Lee, I've actually got a picture to prove that it was done, launched it in Canberra, to a Diabetes Australia crowd. But the most important thing was Alex and Donna Archie were involved with me and a committee in preparing an advice to the Minister, which was quite a very big advice to the Minister, which was lodged 3 months ago, which had about 7 goals. One of the most important goals was to reduce the burden of diabetes in the Indigenous community. Well, the government then let the Department of Health play with this document, and all of a sudden it became about 1/3 the size of the original document, which is a typical bureaucratic thing. The less you talk about diabetes, the less you have to spend on diabetes, the less you have to do about diabetes. But amazingly, the one section that was hardly touched, I think they're scared of Alex Brown and Donna Archie, was the Indigenous section. And the Indigenous section, which I presume perhaps someone will make a copy and let you know now, this is now a public document. It's on the Department of Health in Canberra on the website. But Minister Lee, in her wisdom, also released our original document as well, so people can see how they've stuffed up in the department in this document, and know that we did protect the interests of all people with diabetes in Australia. So the other thing I'd just like to say is that I think that this is a phenomenal project. I'm very thrilled to be involved with Samri and Alex and the team in this project. And as Steve said, it's going to tell us a lot about why people in your community get diabetes and why the complications are worse in the community. And it's certainly a landmark study, and it was fantastic that it was funded. It's a little bit underfunded, so we hope that more money will come out of the clouds to support Alex and the team. And thank you all for being here, and I guess many of you will be participating in the study, and good luck.